A great meeting point, convenient light meals, hot and cold beverages, or a quick snack on the go? What's your order for the day? We don't just say, we do. It's the Stain City way.
Hello and welcome to Real Talk with myself, Anele, right here on SABC3. The stage is yours. Listen, no chipmunk jokes, okay? I had root canal done on my face. So I'm well aware that this cheek is not as big as this cheek. Please, keep the jokes at bay, because today it is really not about me. My little bit of a pain pales in comparison to what we're talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, today on the show, we're talking about a hard-hitting topic, which is children with rare and life-threatening illnesses. It is reported that there are approximately 7,000 different types of rare diseases and disorders in the world, with more being discovered each day. But because they are rare and the symptoms uncommon to most doctors, they still represent a huge medical challenge. Families with children affected by rare and life-threatening illnesses do not only have to bear the financial strain of medical bills, they're also inevitably forced to live through the harrowing emotional impact, firstly, of accepting that their child might not outlive them, but also the helplessness of watching their children suffer. We're going to meet Calvin and Charlene dos Santos, as well as Nicole Capper and Mervyn Cerebro in a little while, and they will share their experiences. First on the couch, though, is Leanne Griffiths from Rare Diseases South Africa. Leanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us. It's really a blessing to be able to be here and to communicate our cause.
Oh, excellent. Now, before we get into what you guys do, how you do it, and how you started doing it, can you please define to us, what is a rare disease?
It is basically a condition that impacts 1 out of 2,000 people.
Across the globe?
Absolutely.
Okay. And how are you guys discovering them, and what are the stats? Like, you know, how quickly do you discover it? Who reports it to you? How do you verify it?
Sure. So basically in South Africa, you're looking at about 3.7 million people that are affected by a rare disease. That's 1 out of 7 people. 50% of those are children, and 30% of those children will only live to see their 5th birthday.
So do you guys work a lot on say hindsight, right? Because someone is sick and then they pass away, and then only in the autopsy do you guys then discover, oh, wait a minute, this is what this person had and we didn't know they had it. So
what you're looking at generally is about 7 years to discover the diagnosis. Oh. It's a long time. Now that is it's a lot shorter with children, but a lot longer with adults. How the process generally works is that you'll go see the doctor. The doctor will probably diagnose you with a common disease. He will then give you medication. And what will end up happening is that these patients will not respond to the medication, which will then lead to further investigations, which unfortunately sometimes leads to the diagnosis of a rare disease. So
you go to a doctor who then sees the symptoms as something normal, and then you don't get better. Then you go to a second opinion and a third opinion.
Absolutely, more investigations, more investigations.
Then you escalate to a specialist. Are there specialists who are out there purely to treat and diagnose rare diseases?
Yes, there is, but at the same time, there really is a lack of medical science and research in this country specifically. I know with a lot of the patients, and including some of the patients that you're going to talk today, a lot of them have been forced to go across borders just to get that extra bit of support.
And I mean, this sounds like an expensive exercise.
It can be.
You know, let's talk finance.
Yes,
it just sounds like if you don't have money, you're not going to survive.
It's not easy. So there are a lot of patients that are on medical aid, thank goodness, but there are a lot of patients that don't have medical aid, or there's a shortfall. And that is where Rare Diseases comes in, and we help lobby to try get that funding for the medication. Look, there's a lot more things that Rare Diseases do, and I'll take you through that separately, but if, you know, financially, yes, there are consequences, but we try help wherever we can.
So how did Rare Diseases come about?
Okay, so Rare Diseases was established in 2013 by Kelly Duplessis. Her son was actually diagnosed with a rare disease, Pompe disease, and she found that there was a real need to set up an organization that could help all these patients. The organization has managed to improve and impact the lives of over 5,000 patients just in such a short period of time. If you look at the core functions of the organization, it's education, guidance, support, from diagnosis to treatment, to ongoing support, to end of life. We also offer networks of doctors, other patients, caregivers as well. We do.
So is there like a website or like some sort of, let's say, Facebook, where you're there and you guys are talking and you say, listen, my child has this, and then you can link up with other parents or whose children have had the same thing, so you can, you know, you can ask the relevant questions, you can get the right support, you can, you know, cry to the right people, I suppose.
We establish those networks, so it could be networks with patients, networks with doctors, networks with caregivers.
And then how are you guys getting your funding?
Well, we do have some corporate funders, which we're very grateful for. We also depend on public support. So we have what we call Rare Activists, which is basically a sporting platform. There is Riding for Rare, Swimming for Sadie, a lot of different sporting platforms where people come in, general public come in, they get involved in these initiatives, and that obviously contributes towards the funding. As an NPO, there can never be enough funding. So we're always pleading for funding, because the more we have, the more we can help.
What's up with the dolls?
Okay, so
I don't think they're dolls though. Those are
these are rare bears. Okay, so even though we are an NPO, we believe in giving back. This was a project that we started a few years ago with Kaya Kids, where we trained a lot of unemployed ladies to make rare bears. Okay, so everyone is unique because there's so many different unique diseases. And what happens is that we then sell them to anybody, or they'll get given to a lot of our patients. We started off with 9 unemployed ladies. We're now up to 50 ladies, and this is what they do on a full-time basis.
And you guys sell them, or you give them to the kids?
We do. We sell them. You can either keep them for yourself, or you can give them to a patient in need.
So in the organization of, you know, Rare Diseases South Africa, do you have, are people volunteering their services, or are they on a permanent basis, like doctors, psychologists, therapists, you know, PR people?
Yes, so you have a combination of both. Most of the time we work with volunteers, people that really just give their time and help because they really believe in this cause.
And have you experienced something where, you know, someone comes in with the rare disease and you guys live the entire life out with them up until a cure is found?
Yes, that's part of what we do. That is actually one of the core things of what we do. Support, education and guidance from the moment they're diagnosis to end of life. And
then when you say end of life?
There's very few cures, there's very few medications that can cure rare diseases. In fact, most of the time, the medication is really just there to prolong life. So we're there during the journey, the patient journey, and we're there to also offer support to the families.
And have you found that when, what a term, but I mean, it's reality, when end of life happens, that the family stays on to then help out other families that are going to go through the same thing?
Yes. Yes.
And this is what you guys do?
Absolutely. Then we work with them. We work with a lot of those different families. And in fact, a lot of those families have actually set up, you know, separate bodies just to try drive awareness and education and help to those in need that are suffering from a similar rare disease.
So how do people get hold of you? I mean, somebody's probably watching now, and I think at most they suspect that their child who's not getting better has got this rare disease. How do they get hold of you? And people who also want to just like lend a hand, maybe volunteer, maybe make some care bears, rare bears.
Yes, rare bears.
Care bears. Look at my childhood coming through.
Yes.
So how do they get hold of you?
So the best thing is to start on our website, www.rarediseases.co.za. There you will find all the information, our contact details, our address, and also various ways that you can help if you want to help financially, if you want to be involved in our Rare Activist platforms and, you know, just be part of the journey and help other people. All the information is on our website. I encourage you to visit it. We also have presence on all social media platforms under Rare Diseases.
I assume you guys are based in Joburg?
We are.
Do you have satellite offices around the country?
We work around the country, and we are you know, extending our knowledge and research to beyond the South African borders. In fact, we are present at a lot of trainings that happen internationally as well.
So you're active in all provinces?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, excellent, because I mean, you know, rare diseases happen in Eastern Cape as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, Leanne, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having
me. The website, one last time,
www.rarediseases.co.za.
Excellent. A big thank you Julianne Griffiths from Rare Diseases South Africa for shedding some light on prevalence rates of rare illnesses, but also the organization is definitely a resource for assistance should you or a family member need it. Stay tuned, because after the break, we'll meet a young man who at the age of 13 was diagnosed with a rare adrenal gland tumor growing between his vital organs. We'll be back after the break. If you've just joined us today, we're talking about the harsh reality many South Africans face, regardless of wealth or race, when their child is diagnosed with a rare and life-threatening illness. In studio, I have Calvin Dos Santos and his mother, Charlene. Calvin and Charlene, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So this disease that your son had, this adrenal gland disease, right?
Yeah.
Which is something he found, Charlene, between his vital organs. What are his vital organs?
Basically, he was ill, they reckon, since the age of 3. And I was at the doctors all the time, and it was one diagnosis after the next. And eventually...
I never got any of the right diagnosis.
So you were misdiagnosed until you were 13?
Yeah.
And at 13, he was actually very, very ill. And at that stage, the tumor literally had taken over his whole of his vital organs, and we were looking at surgery, and the options were that we had to go and see various surgeons, and they said, well, we can only debulk, where we have to remove the organs and then debulk and then put it back in again. And they said to us, go on your family holiday, and there's a high risk of him not surviving the operation.
So, Calvin, had you accepted that, look, I'm a sickly child? You know those kids who can't sit in the sun, they're allergic to grass, they're allergic to everything but water, and they eat goji berries when everyone else is eating cheese curls. Were you that kid?
I kind of doubted everything, and everything just wasn't going right in my life, and I really I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, if that makes sense.
But I understand you were quite sporty as well and quite active, so, you know...
I was, and that's actually how we managed to identify the problem. It was through sport, and I would run around the field maybe once, and then I'd just go white as a sheet. I'd be dizzy, I would vomit, stomach cramps, and then we would go to the doctor, and once I was there, they would say everything's fine, you know. My sugar had stabilized, and they couldn't really, they just said it was stomach problems, and they couldn't really identify what the actual problem was.
At one point they said he had fecal impact. Just go and take a whole lot of suppositories, a teenager, and you know, and he was in excruciating pain, and they just said give buscopain, and then so the journey kept on going.
Do you keep changing doctors when this is happening?
No, we started off with a GP, and eventually in 2013 our friends we went away for a weekend, and Calvin's friend was cycling normally, and Calvin just buckled over and he started to vomit, and a normal aged boy should just be able to cycle. And we discussed it, and that Monday I said to the GP, we need to get to a specialist.
Is this now in his teens?
Yes.
Okay.
And I just, it's not easy to get into a specialist, and I just said, we have to go. And she took a week, but then once we got to Professor Siegel, he was amazing. He had diagnosed it. We did the test, the MRI, the MIBGs, and we did everything, and we just started going from there.
Calvin, how old are you now?
I'm now 17. 17,
okay, so this is 4 years ago. 13, yes, you're older, but you're not old, you're not an adult. Who sits you down and breaks it down to you that, Calvin, this is what's going on, these are the risks, and this is what we're going to attempt to do?
I think my parents kept it from me for quite a while. They didn't want to tell me, but initially they did tell me, and it was very hard, you know, as a teen of 13. I couldn't really understand why was this happening to me, you know. I couldn't understand why fate had chosen me to be put on this journey. But they told me, and I kind of managed to see what this is all about and consider all the other options. And it was through friends we actually managed to find a skilled set of surgeons in Germany who actually could do endoscopic surgery. So that was not the open surgery where they needed to debulk all the major organs. So that was what saved my life.
Do you have other children?
I do.
You look there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool. Like I just saw your eyes dart this way. Okay, so now how do you, because when someone is that sick, all your attention and all your resource goes there, but then you're still raising other children who need to be as balanced and as confident and feel as loved. What happens with that?
It's very difficult, but I've had an amazing set of friends that would just come and, help, and they'd bring meals and arrange for a play date, and family would come up. Calvin was in Paris in December again. I had to stay and work, and him and his dad went to he had another 2 tumours removed now in December, and it just helped, by having friends they could go on a play date and support. It really does help.
So is this ongoing? You're not totally healed?
We did a scan in April now, and the 2 tumours that were in the bone of his spine got removed at Paris. So we're feeling very blessed.
But it's still a constant battle. I have always a threat, and I need to look after myself for the rest of my life and do constant yearly checkups. So there's still that possibility it might return, but for now
carries
I'm
that
healed.
genetic gene.
When you say I have to look after myself, what are the things you're not allowed to eat? Are the sports you're not allowed to do? Is there a way you're not allowed to sit? What are the
I suppose just having a healthy diet and exercising, and I'm not allowed to do contact sports such as rugby, but kind of just leading a normal life, a healthy lifestyle.
No sugar, we were told. Tumours
they don't like sugar.
No, they actually love it. They feed off it.
You're feeding it.
So try and watch your diet and bring in a lot of the greens and the healthy.
So does the whole family then?
We have changed our diet a lot. We have had to change that,
and then do you then constantly also put the other children through testing?
We had to have Caleb tested because it's a genetic
predisposition.
Okay.
Fortunately, he doesn't carry the gene.
So are you the only one in the family who carries the gene?
That's right.
Yeah, I got it from my dad.
And my husband.
And has he ever been sick?
He got diagnosed with diabetes, but he's been very healthy other than his diabetes. But it's just we have to watch it. We found out now subsequently it's within the family line,
and others have been affected.
So what's your how do you take care of your spirit? Because I know how you take care of the medical side of things. You see specialists, you go to Germany, you see people in Paris, you have doctors here. But your spirit, how do you take care of your mind and yourself?
Faith has been a journey that's put me in a situation that only God's grace can carry you, and miracles happen, and doors have opened, and situations we would be put into a situation where he had to go and get an emergency visa, and we'd land up at the German embassy, and they just granted us an emergency visa free of charge, open for 2 years. So it's amazing. We've had friends who pray for us all the time, and just a lot of support and faith.
It's love and faith, and sort of realizing that there's so many others in worse off positions than yourself. I remember just being in oncology wards with little kids and babies on chemo connected to drips, and they're refusing and they're crying, and it's so heartbreaking just to see those small kids. And I'm a 17-year-old there, well, I was 13 at the time. But seeing how lucky I was, and there's so many more people who are battling and struggling, and they just need this advice from doctors, but they're in this constant state of struggle.
Those little children are heroes.
They really are.
They're fighters, and it's humbling to be in those situations, and you walk that journey, that fight together.
And how you like at school academically? Because I mean, if you're jetting off to go save your life, surely you're missing out on double maths and double science and double history.
Yeah, there were a few setbacks, and actually, luckily enough, I did miss a few exams, which I was quite happy on.
You like, high five yourself, Calvin.
Pretty much. But yeah, I had to catch up a little bit.
The teachers were wonderful.
But all the teachers were very accommodating, and the school was the biggest support system there.
What school is this?
De La Salle.
Okay.
And they really knew my case and knew what I've been through.
They were very supportive.
They just knew how to handle my case and just be accommodating.
So if this is your reality from, you know, your son being from the age of 3 years old, you know, for a bigger part of his life, for majority part of his life, he has been sick. What advice do you have, you know, for parents who, you know, suspect something is wrong with their child?
Yeah, I remember the receptionist saying to me, "Mrs. DeSantos, you're here again," you know, and you are there often, and I just knew there was something.
Yeah.
And it was frustrating because I felt that I was useless. I go there, and then his blood sugar was high.
So you doubt yourself as a mother as well.
You doubt yourself.
What did I do?
And at one stage, I would say to him, "Just eat properly and stop."
Stop the McDonald's.
You know, and we didn't know he had a tumor, and I felt terrible. But the advice I'd give, you know, life is a journey, and you take those steps, and you have your faith, and you have your support groups, and Reach for a Dream was wonderful to our family as well, and very supportive. And you know, you have all the people they're like angels that just come into your life.
Also, your constant questioning and not accepting the doctor's final word.
Yeah.
They spend nights up reading innumerable books.
Because also your gut feel as a parent. If you suspect they're not hitting it right, go to the next person.
And my husband would spend hours just reading medical journals, and as a layman you don't know what these words are, and then you'd have to research what that word means. But it's constantly never giving up. Keep reading. We had death on our doors, and it's not to say that that's going to happen. You meet the most superb doctors. And technology nowadays is absolutely amazing what they can do.
Guys, this has been enlightening. Calvin, stay alive. You okay? Okay?
Thank you so much.
Stay on top of things. And Charlene, really, please don't knock yourself. You are an amazing mother.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Charlene and Calvin for coming to share their experience. We also hope that Calvin's strength encouraged some of you watching. After the break, we speak to a mother whose little girl was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis at just 3 weeks old. This is Real Talk. Tatum Sloan Capper was born on the 27th of October 2015, and though she came early, she seemed fine. But 3 weeks later, things started going wrong, very wrong, leading to a diagnosis that no parent wishes to hear. Joining me now is her mother, Nicole Capper. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
What's that on your...
This.
I mean, we have to talk about your daughter, but I'm not going to ignore the sash.
Well, thanks for asking. I was lucky enough to be chosen as a Tammy Taylor Mrs. South Africa finalist this year. And that's all because of my little girl, and that's the reason why we're here.
Okay, so are you still going towards the pageant?
Yes.
So you might win it?
Well, fingers crossed.
Okay, all right. Let's talk about your daughter.
Thank you.
3 weeks old, you realize something is wrong. How do you do that? Because, I mean, 3 weeks old cry anyway. So what is it that you're seeing that is wrong?
Well, in the beginning, you try and tell yourself that nothing's wrong, and it's fine, it's just a cough. But very quickly it progressed. And I'll never forget her in my lounge turning grey and battling to breathe. And I had to rush her through peak hour traffic, one hand on the steering wheel, one hand on the back, trying to make sure that she's still breathing. And it's not a situation you want to be in as a parent, but thankfully, she's a little warrior, and she came out the other end. Okay, so you get to the hospital? Well, the problem is that they couldn't diagnose her, and this is the biggest problem with rare diseases, is they're not looked out for. Yeah. They look for the common things first, and in doing that, they often miss rare diseases, which are collectively common, affecting 1 in 10 people. So when you say that they look for, you know, the common diseases, surely, and maybe I'm asking the wrong person here, but let me try. Surely, your rare diseases shares some symptoms with common diseases. Yes, they do. And at first they thought she just had recurrent chest infections, and she just unluckily picked them up. But it became apparent very quickly. She actually was sent home twice, and only for a day at a time, and kept going back to hospital. And eventually at 6 weeks old, she wasn't gaining any weight. She was battling to breathe still, worse than in the beginning, and eventually they managed to diagnose her. Are you changing doctors in this 3 weeks when someone's like,
oh no, it's just a terrible cough. You're like, that's great, I'm going to the next guy.
No, you know, I think it's important to work with a good medical team as long as you're happy, and we were very fortunate to have a good one. But it's about that constant communication and working with a holistic team to get to a diagnosis, and especially when there's so many factors involved, you need to bring every part together, and that's why I'm so grateful to work with Rare Diseases South Africa. And they've been fundamental in our journey to be able to link us to the right people, everything from a psychologist for your family, which is critical, to nutritionists and dietitians and speech therapists and the works.
When do you get the diagnosis that it's cystic fibrosis?
When do you get it?
Like, as in, when in her journey did you get it? Is
at 6 weeks.
At 6 weeks.
Yes.
And when the doctors explain it to you, what did they say it is? Because I mean, we may watch medical TV shows, but no one knows what it is.
I'll be very honest with you. I am a pharmacist, and I didn't know what cystic fibrosis was. I knew that they're the kids that walk around with face masks in hospital on drips. You're always in hospital, and that's all I knew.
Okay.
And I needed to do my own research as well, and it's quite frightening. It's no family history in our family, but 1 in 27 South Africans carry a gene.
So when they break it down, they say, this is what is wrong with your child. This is what it means for the rest of their life. This is what you'll have to do. Can you just like tell me like I'm stupid?
Cystic fibrosis is a disease that causes thick, sticky mucus to build up in the lungs and other vital organs like the pancreas. So they first of all can't digest food properly because the mucus blocks their enzymes. So you have to give them special enzymes to help them absorb. That's why she was so skinny. And then the mucus in the lungs is the biggest problem because it causes chronic degeneration of the lung tissue. And you just got to fight to keep those lungs alive. I mean, she goes through 4 to 6 hours of therapy a day, physio.
How old is she now?
She's turning 2 in October. And she's a warrior, and it's quite amazing what these kids are capable of. And she's been my absolute inspiration. You know, I had this moment when I was sitting in ICU. I got to meet some of the moms of other cystic fibrosis kids, and I was struck with this fear of what would our lives look like as a family. And we made a decision right off the bat that we wanted to live as normal a life as possible. But more than that, I think more than her needing me to be her physio, her OT, her psychologist or her doctor, I needed to be an example to my little girl. And that's why I'm sitting wearing this sash today. It's first for myself to accomplish the things that I wanted to do in my life, but also for my family, to show my kids that they can achieve anything that they want to do if they just believe and work hard enough, because she's going to have to work a lot harder than kids her age.
So will it be ever cured where she doesn't have it? So
well, they're working on a lot of great treatments at the moment, potentially drugs on the horizon, but it's a very tricky science, and I'm a realist, but an optimistic realist. And we've just got to accept sometimes that we have a lot in life. And it was very hard initially to accept that your child may not outlive you. And the average life expectancy is 30s or 40s.
When you've got
cystic fibrosis. And no one wants to hear that their child will live to that age. But again, partnering with Rare Diseases has been phenomenal, because you're surrounded by kids that are far worse. And it gives you a little bit of perspective. It helps you keep yourself in check. And I've always believed, surround yourself by people that lift you and inspire you, and people that also keep you grounded and thankful and give you perspective.
What changes in your life? What must you change? What are you not allowed to have in your house when you have somebody who's diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, and what should you have in your house?
What you should do is you should wrap your child in a plastic bubble.
Like, and tell them to stay there and open a little hole and you feed them like that.
I did that for a while.
Really?
And then you realize they're not going to have any quality of life. And I've got a 6-year-old as well, and he is completely healthy. But I don't know what his life looks like either, because nothing is guaranteed. We don't know what our lives are going to look like. So you've got to live life to the max every single day. Obviously, I need to try and keep her away from infections. She can only go to school when she's 3, turning 4. But aside from that, try and stay normal and just keep those lungs clear by doing lots of therapy.
And there's no diet change?
Yeah, lots of diet change. It's one of the most expensive illnesses, because I mean, she's on over 50,000 rands worth of medication a month to keep her alive. But beyond that, cystic fibrosis is an absorption problem. So nutrition is key, and I'm really lucky because that's my game. I work in preventative medicine and pharmacy, and to be able to give her the right supplements, you see a world of difference.
Man. Okay, look, Nicole, thank you so much.
Thank you for shining a spotlight on rare diseases. We really appreciate it.
No, really, no. Forget the light on me. Thank you to you guys, and good luck.
Thank you.
Do you have to say world peace at the end of everything?
Tempting, but
yeah. Don't do it. I think this cause is big enough for you to take the crown.
Thank you. I really do appreciate you.
And say what's up to your husband. He's been on the show, right?
I know. Now I've got one next to him, you know.
Okay, so now we want the kids next time. We've done the entire family.
I was thinking of bringing her today, but it would have been chaos.
No. She must stay safe.
Good chaos.
There we go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anele.
While cystic fibrosis has no cure treatments and medical innovation continues to improve, and so does the expectancy, we wish little Tatum and her family all the best. After the break, we speak to a parent who lost their child to an illness. Stay with us. "21 years ago, Mervyn Cerebro and his family had their world turned upside down when their eldest child, Darren, passed away after a 2-year battle with acute myeloid leukemia, or AML. Traumatic as that experience was, Mervyn and his family have walked a tough road to healing, and today he's turned his grief into positivity despite the odds. He helps others deal with cancer in their little ones. Mervyn is here to share his journey. Thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure.
And good afternoon.
Hi.
So, when did you, as a family, realize that Darren was, not fully healthy?
There were a couple of symptoms that bothered us. It was summer, and he was experiencing what looked like chilblains on his fingers. He was flossing his teeth, and his gums were bleeding. And I remember that initially I said, "You're flossing too aggressively," as parents do.
Yeah.
And I just had a suspicion that things weren't right. And we moved very quickly into a process of investigation and analysis, and there it was.
So what I've picked up, in the course of the show where we're discussing rare diseases is that, there is a lot of misdiagnosing that happens, and you have to look for a second opinion, and you doubt yourself, and you think, you're flossing too hard. Did this also happen with you guys where, it took a while before you knew what was wrong, or was it like a light bulb moment quickly?
It was immediate in that they did a bone marrow, and the results were there. It was evident that he had leukemia, and a very aggressive form of leukemia. AML, at that time particularly, was very difficult to treat, and his form of AML 4-5, was perhaps the most aggressive form of leukemia.
And how old was he then?
He was 21.
Okay. And did you have other children?
I did have. In fact, I do have. I had already lost a child, a 6-month-old daughter. And we figured that we had paid our dues, and that lightning doesn't strike twice. So clearly we were absolutely shattered. And it was the beginning of a 2-year nightmare.
And what's the immediate thing that happens when you find that out? Do you, start looking for the best of the best to see if you can fight it? Do you accept your fate and say, you know what, let's just make sure that we spend all our time with you? What's the process?
Well, they immediately installed a port in his chest through which chemotherapy is administered. Because chemo is toxic, and if you use peripheral veins, clearly that creates complexity. And within days, he was in hospital having induction chemotherapy. And of course, immediately thereafter, he was experiencing the side effects of the chemo. Some chemo is more toxic than other chemo, and the side effects vary depending upon the type of drug and clearly the patient. And immediately your whole world changes, and all that you focus upon is hospital and home. Nothing else matters. That becomes your entire universe.
And I know, with chemo, they say the support that the patient is given also goes a long way towards recovery. So did you guys, the family and the extended family, do you gather around him and make sure that he doesn't lose hope?
Well, the patient immediately becomes neutropenic because your immune system becomes impaired as a product of the chemotherapy. So barrier nursing has to be applied, and obviously almost nobody can go into the ward without masking and scrubbing. And I spent almost every night for 16 months. My son was in hospital, although not continuously, for long periods, and about 16 months out of the 2 years he was in a cubicle because as they are neutropenic, infection is a major risk factor. And you focus upon a belief in recovery, obviously.
Yeah.
And you engage with the medical team and you watch the results as they come through each day as the bloods are taken. And if there's a minuscule change in the blood levels, positive gives you a sense of belief in the future. Negative results creates an anxiety. So as a family, that becomes your everything.
Your life.
Sure.
Your life. Did you ever want to pull him out of chemo and be like, you know what, this is not a person. The fact that I have to speak to my son through a cubicle is not normal.
Well, we were in the cubicle with him. Clearly, I was in the cubicle.
Yeah.
But that's not a choice that the parent can make when you're dealing with a 21-year-old adult. And you focus upon the research, you focus upon the statistics, and even if there is a 20% or 5% recovery rate from a particular disease, you focus upon the fact that you believe that you, as a family, will be the positive percentage in terms of recovery.
When did you accept that the end was near?
You never do.
Until the very moment where he's
well, you don't, because as long as there is life, there is hope. And he was a remarkable human being, and he was very engaging. In fact, one of the nursing sisters wrote a book about him, and that's a story for another day, and about what she learned from him, the patient, because of his wonderful mind and his positivity
and his
throughout.
Outlook.
Yeah.
What's the name of the book?
I don't know.
You don't remember? Because now I want to read it because it reminds me of a book called
I don't know.
Tuesdays with Maury, where it was the same thing, you know, somebody who was dying, but his outlook on life was amazing. What's your belief system like when that is happening? Are you, you know, as a family, because you have to stay strong as well.
You know, you become ambivalent. And it's a product of the journey. And each of you deal differently with your anxieties, your belief system, and your fears.
But how do you as the, I don't want to say head of the family, because, you know, you never know, your wife's going to be like, excuse me, but how do you keep everyone together and everyone strong and everyone hopeful? Because you yourself must be going through the worst time when you're watching your son, you know, go through this. How do you keep everyone above water?
It's always more difficult being an observer than the patient. Because when you're playing on the field, you're oblivious of the crowd. But when you're in the stands screaming and yelling, it really doesn't have any influence on what's happening on the field. So we clearly, each of us, engaged differently with him. And he spoke about different things to each of us. So he was providing us with support in many respects, because he was the patient. And we were obviously remaining positive, but he was extremely smart. And you never fabricate, you don't lie to the patient. If the patient wants to know what the results of the particular tests are, you tell them. How you tell them matters.
Did you speak at his funeral?
It was an enormous funeral. There must have been, I don't know, 1,800 or 2,000 people. No, I didn't speak at the funeral.
Do you wish you had?
No.
No. And that was that. And now you help others deal with, you know, through this if their children are also diagnosed with rare illnesses.
There is nothing more lonely than the isolation that a family experiences when you're fighting to save a life of somebody you love. Some of your friends disappear because they don't quite know how to deal with you and what to say. And then strangers come out of the woodwork, and they might have experienced pain themselves. So you discover new relationships. And it's a nightmarish journey. And you deal with it day by day, minute by minute, depending on how the patient is doing at that particular point in time. And I work with people in pain, clearly through Reach for a Dream, which I'm privileged to be the chairman of, with a super group of people who feel as passionately as I do. And I work on another foundation as well, called the Access to Cancer Foundation. I was engaged with the Bone Marrow Registry establishment as well. So it's part of one's healing. And it's part of wanting to help other people who feel the isolation and loneliness that you felt.
You are a better human being than most people. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for turning your pain into, you know, a shining light for other people. Mervyn, thank you for joining us on Real Talk.
Thank you.
We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to the final segment of the show, where I'm now joined by counseling psychologist Olga Mulebatsi, who's here to talk about how to cope with the illness and the strain it puts on not only the patient, but everyone in the family unit. So for most of the guests today, I asked this question, you know, what's your belief system? What's your faith system? You know, did you go for therapy? When you have a family member suffering from a rare illness like this, and also a terminal one, is it important to, as much as you're involving the medical side and, you know, the doctors and, you know, the research, to factor in therapy to take care of your soul?
Of course, yes. Obviously, then there is the psychological part of things. You know, obviously, when diagnosis is, you know, you are being told about the diagnosis, the shock, the disbelief that takes place, you know.
The why us?
Why me? Why? That on its own. And other people just also become in denial. They remain like that for a couple of weeks because it's just too much for their system or for their mind to can process. So thus counseling is necessary for everyone actually, because this changes how you perceive your life. You know, it changes meaning of your life also. So in counseling, they give you the space to not be strong, to not try to hold it together, you know, to just
for
to
both
feel
sides, eh?
Exactly. So yeah, that's the space that you can use to also redefine, reframe, you know, the whole situation, the new chapter of your life that you just found. And it's not just for the patient, it's not just for the parent, it's also for the whole family. They can also come and consult so that they can get the help they need.
You said, you know, the denial can last for weeks, but what if the denial is months? Can the family, because I mean, some people deny and they don't want to go through treatment and be like, you know what, I'm fine, I'm gonna be fine by myself. You know, as a family, what are your options when that happens?
As a family, you can involve other people who could encourage, you know, this person to come, because also it's, I mean, denial, it's not acknowledging, you know, not acknowledging the symptom or not the symptom, the illness itself, you know. So you can actually just ask other people to intervene and just encourage this person to go and help. Even the medical people themselves, the doctors, you know, they know how this person may need medical help. So they are the persons also to say, no. This is the diagnosis. You also need to go and see a psychologist, counseling psychologist or clinical psychologist, anyone who can be able to help,
every time I've dealt with someone who's got a terminal illness or rare illness, I find that the person who's sick is always trying to make everyone else feel better, right? It's like, because there's that look in the eyes of like that sympathy, like, oh no, what are we gonna do? When you are in these therapy sessions, how do you level that ground and be like, guys, you know, whether you're sick or not, the fact that you're here, it means that we're all affected.
Yes, obviously you get their story. You want to know, you probe or you explore from each individual how, since you've heard about this, what does this mean? What is happening in your, you allow expression of emotions, the meaning as well, the reframing of the situation, where to from here, the practicalities, socially, how does it affect you? You spoke about finances, you spoke, I mean, if it's a child, the school, you probe into understanding each and every one of them, and then also as a family, then that's when you come to the conclusion of how can you then move on from this, and how are you going to deal with that practically, so that now, let's say Calvin here is diagnosed with this disease, this is going to affect his schooling, this is going to affect nutrition. Can we now be at peace that from now on we are going to be eating a lot of sugar, can we now, obviously, but you also need to take count of other illnesses in the family. It's not that should be the primary, because also that it can
overshadow
exactly
other people who also need the love and attention.
Exactly. So you also need to be aware of such as well.
Olga, you made everything simpler and clearer for us. Thank you so much for your time. We hope to have you back soon. That's all we have time for today. I want to thank all my guests today. It's not easy to share like this, so strength and healing to all the families and children affected. Please join us again tomorrow when we'll be talking to Minister Nomvula Mukanyane, Mama Action, and she is known. Thank you so much for joining us. Good night.